Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, the latest in a line of the highest grossing media franchise in the world, and they feel like they were developed by 2006 Sonic Team. In this day and age that we're in, we're seeing glitch compilations for the latest Pokémon game, and hype videos praising the new Sonic game. What kind of timeline is this in? Pokémon Scarlet and Violet really feel like the culmination of the last few years of the Pokémon franchise, and even though we had that one bright spot with Pokémon Legends Arceus, it just feels like the games have been getting gradually more disappointing as we went on. But at the same time, I can keep seeing the series get gradually more ambitious. Especially with Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, this feels like, if it was fully realized, this could be the best Pokémon game easily. But unfortunately, that didn't happen, which is why we're here today. I want to start out this video by saying that I did really enjoy going through Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. I had fun with these games, but at the same time I can recognize the massive issues present in them. I generally agree with the sentiment that these games should not have been released in this state, and in the state they're in right now, it's completely unacceptable for a AAA release in the year 2023. But to start off on a more positive note, there are a few things that I genuinely like about these games. First of all, the story is definitely one of the better ones in recent memory. Now, I'm absolutely a sucker for any plotline that involves someone with a pet, so Arven's storyline with Mabosstiff was really sweet. And I'd recommend you look into that yourself, because I'm not going to be spoiling any of that today. And speaking of Mabosstiff, the new Pokemon in this generation are generally pretty decent, even though there are some designs that definitely feel like filler, say like Flamigo and a few others. I still think in general, these new Pokemon are great. I love Clodsire, Farigiraf is a cool new evolution. The Dunsparce may have been a little bit disappointing, but I think it's really funny that the long-awaited Dunsparce evolution is just a bigger Dunsparce. And Tinkaton is probably my favorite new Pokemon. I just love the energy it has, just with the giant hammer, throwing rocks at Corviknight. And of course, there's always the age-old decision of which starter did you pick. Now personally, I picked Fuecoco, and I absolutely love the line. Crocodile might be a bit disappointing for a middle stage, but I still think he's pretty good, and Skeledridge is easily the best of the three final stage starters. Not the biggest fan of the Meowscarada line, same with the Quaxly line. I think they're both not that great and fall into the same design ranks as the previous few starters, but I still think they're fine overall, although I really don't like Quaxwell. And the final positive, I do really think that the regional dex in this game is pretty great. A good combination of new and old Pokemon. You see new Pokemon about once in every 3 mons, so I think they space them out really well, and they're pretty common. As well as that, the returning Pokemon are mostly hits. There aren't a lot of duds like in previous generations. But even that is not a full positive, because they didn't put in Pokemon Home compatibility at launch. Like, did they learn nothing from Pokemon Legends Arceus and BDSP? If you add Pokemon Home compatibility this late, nobody's really going to care. It's always a feature that should be there from the very beginning. And speaking of removed features, Dexit is back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this isn't the biggest bother for me personally, but there's a lot of people who want to transfer their old Pokemon in, and some of the Pokemon just... you can't. That's it. Now pay for a $30 DLC just so you can transfer in your old Pokemon. Yay! What a great business strategy, guys. For a franchise with the slogan, gotta catch 'em all, it's certainly weird how they don't let you do that in most of their modern games. But believe me, if this is where the complaints ended, we'd be looking at a pretty decent game here. But unfortunately, there's a whole lot more than meets the eye here. And what meets the eye here is these atrocious graphics. And believe me, I don't blame the developers for this at all. The developers always try to make the best game possible, it's just that a lot of the time they're restricted by the parent company. Think Sega with Sonic Team. But in this case, it's Game Freak and the Pokemon Company. With Legends Arceus, the one big complaint was that the graphics just didn't look good. The world was bland, and the towns just didn't look that finished with all the muddy textures. And so what did they do? Instead of waiting to release the next Pokemon game, they decided to release it right away, and the game suffers from the exact same issues, just even worse. It's a real shame too, because looking at some of the concepts for the towns in Scarlet and Violet, they look really nice. Take Cascarafa for example. It could have been this beautiful town with various shades of blue that was built on the side of a cliff. It's got these waterfall walls going throughout the town, these really nice houses. It's a fancy place to eat. You can go up the walls in these elevators, there's mills. It could have looked so great. But unfortunately, this texture work and this awful sandstorm effect that's coming in from the desert nearby just makes this look bad. And if you thought the pop-in in Sword and Shield was bad, oh boy have I got a surprise for you. It's back, and in full force too. But while these towns may look bad, surely they have a lot to do in them to make up for that. Well, That's where you're wrong, because these towns have absolutely nothing to do in them other than the gym. In this case, you can't even go to most of the buildings in the game. A staple of this franchise was that you could go into these doors. They even made a joke about it in Black and White 2, where you could fight Cynthia in one of the houses. Going into buildings has been a staple of this franchise for a while. Even Sword and Shield, you could go into most of these buildings. What a shame it is that in Scarlet and Violet, they can't even be bothered to do that. The big town of the game, Mesagoza, which is basically the Lumio City equivalent, on the surface looks giant, and it looks like there's a ton of stuff to do. But the only notable location here is the Academy, because other than that, most of these buildings are blocked off. The ones you can go into are the same copy and pasted shops throughout the rest of the game, most of which are just menus. You can't even go into the buildings. The open world section of the game fares a little bit better in the content department, but in the visual department, it's easily the worst part of the game. The open world just looks bland and generic with these grasslands, desert, snow that we've all seen before. But the open worlds are still fun to run around in, I'll give them that. The open world is also where most of the visual stuttering comes into effect, as well as most of the performance issues. It just seems like the Switch isn't able to handle it, but that's not even true because the Switch can handle Breath of the Wild and Xenoblade Chronicles just fine, and they have visuals that are 10 times more advanced than this. It's clear to me that Pokemon is just rushing the production of these games. And the sad part is, that's not even where the nitpicks end. I can go on and on about problems in these games, like how they decided to remove the sparkles in the sound effect when a shiny comes on screen, and because Pokemon in this world are smaller than they've ever been, you could just sometimes not even notice a shiny, especially for the ones that are hard to tell apart, say like Garchomp or Magneton. Or the absolute joke that is only having 4 clothing options available when even X and Y, the games where the feature was first introduced, had more. And here's one that's definitely more personal. I don't think the OST in this game is as good as Galar, or really most of the games that came before. It's definitely not a bad OST and there's a few songs that I like, but overall it just didn't hit as hard for me as the previous few. The character designs in this game, however, I've definitely seen a step up. Most of the NPCs look more characterized than ever, the gym leaders are all really nice, the professors are good, and the champion, Gita, is the most underwhelming champion we've ever had, with one of the worst teams a champion has ever had. And I'm going to be making a video where I fix her team really soon, so stay tuned for that, and subscribe while you're down there. And one more thing that's definitely been a problem for all the recent Pokemon games, it's just the difficulty of this game is just not there. Like, Pokemon Legends Arceus was one of the harder Pokemon games in a while, especially with the Volo fights and the new battle system meaning that your mons would get taken out really quick if you didn't pay attention. And I think it'd be really great if they brought something like that back, just more streamlined. I'm not saying change the battle system entirely, but at least give the trainers more than 3 moves. They had an option in Pokemon Black and White for a difficulty mode, so you could have an increased challenge where all the gym leaders had an extra Pokemon. And I think that option would have gone a long way for this game as well. Maybe not for just an extra Pokemon, but maybe full EVs on all their Pokemon, and maybe even some extra moves that they didn't have on the other difficulty modes. That way everyone is happy. But to wrap this video up, the final area of the game, Area 0, really wraps up everything I think about the game in a nutshell. The area could have looked amazing, with such a great base design, with all these crystals at the bottom of the cave, the cloud ceiling, the cliffs everywhere. It looks amazing. It serves as a really nice finisher to the game, with the battle against the Professor depending on the version, where they use these Paradox Pokemon on their team for a genuinely really tough battle. Literally the first tough battle in the entire game. But this is also brought down by several issues, like the visuals not being up to par, and the dialogue between Arvin and your friends, while really sweet and charming, isn't voice acted, which means it just doesn't hit as hard. Overall, this game isn't awful, and I think if you like the franchise, you'll enjoy it quite a bit. But I'm just tired of saying that this game has a great foundation, but is bogged down by this and this. I think it's truly time the series was modernized, and hopefully they can accomplish that with the next entries. But I definitely doubt it, because this is the same company that put out BDSP, as well as Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet in the same year. So, that's it for me. Davron, signing off.